Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson is a British politician who served as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and leader of the Conservative Party from 2019 to 2022. He previously served as Foreign Secretary from 2016 to 2018 and as Mayor of London from 2008 to 2016. Johnson has been Member of Parliament for Uxbridge and South Ruislip since 2015. Having previously been MP for Henley from 2001 to 2008. Johnson attended Eton College, and studied classics at Balliol College, Oxford. He was elected President of the Oxford Union in 1986. In 1989, he became the Brussels correspondent and later political columnist for the Daily Telegraph, and from 1999 to 2005 was the editor of The Spectator. Following his election to Parliament in 2001, he was a shadow minister under Conservative leaders Michael Howard and David Cameron. In 2008, Johnson was elected Mayor of London and resigned from the House of Commons. He was re-elected Mayor in 2012. At the 2015 general election he was elected MP for Uxbridge and South Ruislip, and the following year did not seek re-election as mayor. Johnson became a prominent figure in the successful Vote Leave campaign for Brexit in the 2016 European Union membership referendum. Theresa May appointed him Foreign Secretary after the referendum. He resigned the position 2 years later in protest at the Chequers Agreement and May's approach to Brexit. In 2019, Johnson was elected leader of the Conservative Party, defeating Jeremy Hunt. He reopened Brexit negotiations and in early September controversially prorogued Parliament. The Supreme Court later that month ruled the action unlawful. After agreeing to a revised Brexit withdrawal agreement, which replaced the Irish backstop with a new Northern Ireland protocol, but failing to win parliamentary support for the agreement, Johnson called a snap election for December 2019 in which he led the Conservative Party to victory with 43.6% of the vote, and the party's largest seat share since 1987. On January 31, 2020, the United Kingdom withdrew from the EU, entering into a transition period and trade negotiations that led to the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement. The COVID-19 pandemic became a major issue of his premiership. The government responded by introducing various emergency powers and measures across society to mitigate the pandemic's impact, and approved the rollout of a nationwide vaccination program. Beginning in December 2021, it emerged that government officials had attended social gatherings which breached COVID-19 regulations, a controversy known as Partygate. In April 2022, Johnson received a fixed penalty notice for attending one of these gatherings, becoming the first Prime Minister of the United Kingdom to be sanctioned for breaking the law while in office. The publishing of the Sue Gray Report and a widespread sense of dissatisfaction led in June 2022 to a vote of confidence in his leadership among Conservative MPs, which he won. In July 2022, revelations over his appointment of Chris Pincher as Deputy Chief Whip led to a mass resignation of ministers from his government and to Johnson announcing his resignation. He left office on September 6 after the leadership election for his successor was completed, and was succeeded by Liz Truss, his Foreign Secretary. Following Truss's resignation in October 2022, Johnson solicited support to stand in the resulting Conservative leadership election, and appeared to be in second place among MPs, but soon announced he would not participate. He remains in the House of Commons as a backbencher. Johnson is a controversial figure in British politics. Supporters have praised him as humorous, witty, and entertaining, with an appeal stretching beyond traditional Conservative Party voters. Conversely, his critics have accused him of lying, elitism, cronyism, and bigotry. Johnson's political positions have sometimes been described as following one nation conservatism, and commentators have characterized his political style as opportunistic, populist, or pragmatic. Early life. Childhood. Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson was born on June 19, 1964 in the Upper East Side of Manhattan, New York City, to 23-year-old Stanley Johnson, then studying economics at Columbia University, and 22-year-old Charlotte Fawcett, an artist from a family of liberal intellectuals. Johnson's parents had married in 1963 before moving to the United States. They returned to their native England in September 1964, so that Charlotte could study at the University of Oxford. During this time she lived with her son in Somertown, a suburb of Oxford, and in 1965 she gave birth to a daughter, Rachel. In July 1965, the family moved to Crouch End in North London, and in February 1966 they relocated to Washington, D.C., where Stanley had gained employment with the World Bank. Stanley then took a job with a policy panel on population control, and moved the family to Norwalk, Connecticut, in June. A third child, Leo, was born in September 1967. In 1969, the family returned to England and settled into West Nethercote Farm, near Winsford in Somerset, Stanley's remote family home on Exmoor in the West Country. There, Johnson gained his first experiences of fox hunting. His father was regularly absent from Nethercote, leaving Johnson to be raised largely by his mother, assisted by au pairs. As a child, Johnson was quiet and studious and was deaf, resulting in several operations to insert grommets into his ears. He and his siblings were encouraged to engage in highbrow activities from a young age, with high achievement being greatly valued. Johnson's earliest recorded ambition was to be world king. Having few or no friends other than their siblings, the children became very close. In late 1969, the family moved to Maida Vale in West London, while Stanley began postgraduate research at the London School of Economics. In 1970, Charlotte and the children briefly returned to Nethercote, where Johnson attended Winsford Village School, before returning to London to settle in Primrose Hill, where they were educated at Primrose Hill Primary School. A fourth child and third son, Joseph, was born in late 1971. After Stanley secured employment at the European Commission, he moved his family in April 1973 to Ucla, Brussels, where Johnson attended the European School, Brussels I, and learned to speak French. Charlotte had a nervous breakdown and was hospitalized with clinical depression, after which Johnson and his siblings were sent back to England in 1975 to attend Ashdown House, a preparatory boarding school in East Sussex. There, he developed a love of rugby and excelled at ancient Greek and Latin, but the teacher's use of corporal punishment appalled him. Meanwhile, in December 1978 his parents' relationship broke down, they divorced in 1980, and Charlotte moved into a flat in Notting Hill, West London, where her children joined her for much of their time. Eton and Oxford, 1977–1987. Johnson gained a King's Scholarship to study at Eton College, a boarding school near Windsor in Berkshire. Arriving in the autumn term of 1977, he began using his middle name Boris rather than his first name Alexander, and developed the eccentric English persona for which he became famous. He abandoned his mother's Catholicism and became an Anglican, joining the Church of England. School reports complained about his idleness, complacency, and lateness, but he was popular and well known at Eton. His friends were largely from the wealthy upper middle and upper classes, his best friends then being Darius Guppy and Charles Spencer, both of whom later accompanied him to the University of Oxford and remained friends into adulthood. Johnson excelled in English and the classics, winning prizes in both, and became secretary of the School Debating Society, and editor of the school newspaper, the Eton College Chronicle. In late 1981, he was elected a member of POP, the small, self-selecting elite and glamorous group of prefects. Later in Johnson's career it was a point of rivalry with David Cameron, who had failed to enter pop. On leaving Eton, Johnson went on a gap year to Australia, where he taught English and Latin at Timbertop, an outward-bound inspired campus of Geelong Grammar, an elite independent boarding school. Johnson won a scholarship to read Literary Humaniores at Balliol College, Oxford, a 4-year course in the study of the classics, ancient literature, and classical philosophy. Matriculating at the university in late 1983, he was one of a generation of Oxford undergraduates who were later to dominate British politics and media in the second decade of the 21st century, among them David Cameron, William Hague, Michael Gove, Jeremy Hunt, and Nick Boles all went on to become senior Conservative Party politicians. While at Oxford, Johnson participated in college rugby union, playing as a Tythead prop for Balliol College's team for 4 years. To his later regret, he joined the old Etonian-dominated Bullingdon Club, an exclusive drinking society notorious for acts of vandalism on host premises. Many years later, a group photograph including himself and Cameron in Bullingdon Club formal dress led to much negative press coverage. He began a relationship with Allegra Mostyn Owen, cover girl for Tatler magazine and daughter of Christie's Education chairman William Mostyn Owen. She was a glamorous and popular fellow student from his own social background. They became engaged while at university. Johnson was popular and well known at Oxford. Alongside Guppy, he co-edited the university's satirical magazine Tributary. In 1984, Johnson was elected secretary of the Oxford Union, and campaigned unsuccessfully for the career-enhancing and important position of Union president. In 1986, Johnson ran successfully for president, but his term was not particularly distinguished or memorable and questions were raised regarding his competence and seriousness. Finally, Johnson was awarded an upper second-class degree, and was deeply unhappy he did not receive a first. Early career. I The Times/I and I The Daily Telegraph/I, 1987–1994. None. Political columnist, 1994–1999. Back in London, Hastings turned down Johnson's request to become a war reporter, instead promoting him to the position of assistant editor and chief political columnist. Johnson's column received praise for being ideologically eclectic and distinctively written, and earned him a Commentator of the Year award at the What the Papers Say Awards. Some critics condemned his writing style as bigotry. In various columns he used the words pickaninnies and watermelon smiles when referring to Africans, championed European colonialism in Uganda and referred to gay men as tank-topped bumboes. Contemplating a political career, in 1993, Johnson outlined his desire to stand as a Conservative candidate to be a member of the European Parliament in the 1994 European Parliament elections. Andrew Mitchell convinced Major not to veto Johnson's candidacy, but Johnson could not find a constituency. He subsequently turned his attention to obtaining a seat in the UK House of Commons. After being rejected as Conservative candidate for Holborn and St Pancras, his party selected him the candidate for CLWID South in North Wales, then a Labour Party safe seat. Spending 6 weeks campaigning, he attained 9,091 votes in the 1997 general election, losing to the Labour candidate. Scandal erupted in June 1995 when a recording of a 1990 telephone conversation between Johnson and his friend Darius Guppy was made public. In the conversation, Guppy said that his criminal activities involving insurance fraud were being investigated by News of the World journalist Stuart Collier, and he asked Johnson to provide him with Collier's private address, seeking to have the latter beaten to the extent of a couple of black eyes and a cracked rib or something like that. Johnson agreed to supply the information, although he expressed concern that he would be associated with the attack. When the phone conversation was published in 1995, Johnson stated that ultimately he had not obliged Guppy's request. Hastings reprimanded Johnson but did not dismiss him. Johnson was given a regular column in The Spectator, sister publication to the Daily Telegraph, which attracted mixed reviews and was often thought rushed. In 1999, he was also given a column reviewing new cars in the magazine GQ. His behavior regularly disgruntled his editors. The large number of parking fines that Johnson acquired while testing cars frustrated GQ staff. At the Daily Telegraph and The Spectator, he was consistently late delivering his copy, forcing many staff to stay late to accommodate him. Some related that if they published without his work included, he would get angry and shout at them with expletives. Johnson's appearance on an April 1998 episode of the BBC's satirical current affairs show Have I Got News for You brought him national fame. He was invited back on to later episodes, including as a guest presenter. For his 2003 appearance, Johnson received a nomination for the BAFTA Television Award for Best Entertainment Performance. After these appearances, he came to be recognized on the street by the public, and was invited to appear on other television shows, such as Top Gear, Parkinson, Breakfast with Frost, and the political show Question Time. The Spectator / I an MP for Henley, 1999-2008. None. Becoming an MP. Second term. Mayor of London. Mayoral election, 2007-2008. In July 2007, Johnson announced his candidacy to be the Conservative candidate for Mayor of London in the 2008 mayoral election. In September, he was selected after gaining 79% of the vote. Indiana, a public London-wide primary. Johnson's mayoral campaign focused on reducing youth crime, making public transport safer, and replacing the articulated buses with an updated version of the AEC Route Master. Targeting the conservative-leaning suburbs of Outer London, it capitalised on perceptions that the Labour mayoralty had neglected them in favour of Inner London. His campaign emphasised his popularity, even among those who opposed his policies, with opponents complaining a common attitude among voters was, "I'm voting for Boris because he is a laugh." The campaign of Labour incumbent Ken Livingstone portrayed Johnson as an out-of-touch toff and bigot, citing racist and homophobic language used in his columns. Johnson responded these quotes had been taken out of context and were meant as satire. In the election, Johnson received 43% and Livingstone 37% of first preference votes. When second preference votes were added, Johnson proved victorious with 53% to Livingstone's 47%. Johnson then announced his resignation as MP for Henley. First term, 2008-2012. Settling into the City Hall mayoral office, Johnson's first official engagement was an appearance at the Sikh celebrations for Vaisakhi in Trafalgar Square. Rather than bringing a team of assistants with him to the job as Livingstone had done, Johnson built his team over the following 6 months. Those in City Hall who were deemed too closely allied to Livingstone's administration had their employment terminated. Johnson appointed Tim Parker to be first deputy mayor, but after Parker began taking increasing control at City Hall and insisted that all staff report directly to him, Johnson dismissed him. Because of these problems, many in the Conservative Party initially distanced themselves from Johnson's administration, fearing it would be counterproductive to achieving a Conservative victory in the 2010 general election. Johnson received criticism during the early weeks of his administration, largely because he was late for 2 official functions in his first week on the job, and because after 3 weeks he went on holiday to Turkey. In July 2008, Johnson visited the closing ceremony of the 2008 Summer Olympics in Beijing, there offending his Chinese hosts with his attire. During the electoral campaign, Johnson had confided to Brian Paddock he was unsure how he would maintain his lifestyle while relying upon the mayoral salary of £140,000 a year. To resolve this problem, he agreed to continue his Daily Telegraph column alongside his mayoral job, thus earning a further £250,000 a year. His team believed this would cause controversy and made him promise to donate a fifth of his Daily Telegraph fee to a charitable cause providing bursaries for students. Johnson resented this, and ultimately did not pay a full fifth. Controversy erupted when he was questioned about his Daily Telegraph fee on BBC's Hard Talk. There, he referred to the £250,000 as chicken feed, something that was widely condemned, given that this was roughly 10 times the average yearly wage for a British worker. During his first administration, Johnson was embroiled in several personal scandals. After moving to a new house in Islington, he built a shed on his balcony without obtaining planning permission. After neighbours complained, he dismantled it. The press also accused him of having an affair with Helen McIntyre and of fathering her child, allegations that he did not deny. Controversy arose when Johnson was accused of warning the MP Damien Green that police were planning to arrest him. Johnson denied the claims and did not face criminal charges under the Criminal Justice Act. He was accused of cronyism, in particular for appointing Veronica Wadley, a former Evening Standard editor who had supported him, as the chair of London's Arts Council when she was widely regarded as not being the best candidate for the position. He was caught up in the parliamentary expenses scandal and accused of excessive personal spending on taxi journeys. His deputy mayor Ian Clement was found to have misused a City Hall credit card, resulting in his resignation. Johnson remained a popular figure in London with a strong celebrity status. In 2009, he rescued Franny Armstrong from anti-social teenagers who had threatened her while he was cycling past them. Policies: relations with police, finance, and the media. Re-election campaign. Second term, 2012-2016. London was successful in its bid to host the 2012 Summer Olympics while Ken Livingstone was still mayor in 2005. Johnson's role in the proceedings was as the co-chair of an Olympic board which oversaw the Games. Two of his actions after taking on this role were to improve transportation around London by making more tickets available and laying on more buses around the capital during the busy period, when thousands of spectators were temporary visitors in London. Johnson was accused of covering up pollution ahead of the Games by deploying dust suppressants to remove air particulates near monitoring stations. In November 2013, Johnson announced major changes to the operation of London Underground, including the extension of operating hours to run through the night at weekends. All staff ticket offices would be closed to save over £40 million a year and replaced with automated ticketing systems. Johnson had a close friendship with American technology entrepreneur, former DJ and model Jennifer Arcuri, with the Sunday Times describing him as a regular visitor to her flat, and implying they were in a sexual relationship. In 2013, a mayoral fund awarded her company, Innotech, £10,000, followed the next year by Arcuri being awarded £15,000 from a government program. Johnson intervened to allow her onto 3 trade mission trips. The Sunday Times said in September 2019 that Johnson failed to declare his personal relationship as a conflict of interest. Later that month, the Greater London Authority referred Johnson and his actions in the matter to the Independent Office for Police Conduct so it can assess whether or not it is necessary to investigate the former Mayor of London for the criminal offence of misconduct in public office. The IOPC was involved because the Mayor is also London's Police and Crime Commissioner. The London Assembly began its own investigation but paused it at the IOPC's request to avoid overlap. On November 9, 2019 it was revealed that the IOPC, which had been due to publish a report on its investigation, had decided to do so after the general election of December 12. The IOPC issued its report in May 2020, concluding that, although there was no basis for any criminal charge, there was evidence that the close relationship between Johnson and Arcuri had influenced decisions by officials. The report found Johnson should have declared an interest concerning Arcury and that his failure to do this could have breached the London Assembly's Code of Conduct. On behalf of the London Assembly, the chair of its Greater London Authority Oversight Committee said the committee would now resume its own investigation. In February 2012, Johnson criticised London's St. Patrick's Day gala dinner celebrations, linking them to Sinn Féin and branding the event lefty crap, for which he later apologised. In February 2013, during a London Assembly meeting following the publication of London's 2014, Johnson was ejected from the meeting following a vote and because his deputy Victoria Borwick had left the chamber. Realising that the vote meant he would not be questioned on the budget, Johnson referred to his political opponents as great supine protoplasmic invertebrate jellies. Johnson attended the launch of the World Islamic Economic Forum in London in July 2013, where he answered questions alongside Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak. He joked that Malaysian women attended university to find husbands, causing some offence among female attendees. In 2014, Johnson published his biography of Winston Churchill, The Churchill Factor. The media emphasized how Johnson repeatedly compared himself to Churchill throughout the book. During campaigning in 2016, he said there was an attempt to create the Roman Empire's united Europe. He said, Napoleon, Hitler, various people tried this out, and it ends tragically. The EU is an attempt to do this by different methods. Also in 2014, he was criticised for saying that almost half of his senior staff were female, when London Assembly members stated that only 4 of 14 top positions in Johnson's administration were occupied by women. In 2015, Johnson criticised then-presidential candidate Donald Trump's false comments that there were no-go zones in London governed by Sharia and inaccessible for non-Muslims. Johnson said Trump was betraying a quite stupefying ignorance that makes him, frankly, unfit to hold the office of President of the United States, becoming the first senior politician in the UK to declare Trump unfit for office. Johnson added that he would invite to come and see the whole of London and take him round the city, except I wouldn't want to expose Londoners to any unnecessary risk of meeting Donald Trump. He later called Trump's comments ill-informed and complete and utter nonsense, adding that the only reason I wouldn't go to some parts of New York is the real risk of meeting Donald Trump. In 2016, he said he was genuinely worried that he could become president, telling ITV's Tom Bradby of one moment where he was mistaken for Trump in New York as one of the worst moments of his life. Johnson did not run for a third term for Mayor of London and stepped down on May 5, 2016 following the election of former Transport Minister, Sadiq Khan. Johnson left office still popular with the people of London. A YouGov poll commissioned at the end of his term revealed that 52% of Londoners believed he did a good job as Mayor of London, while only 29% believed he did a bad job. In 2016, Sadiq Khan announced that 3 German-made water cannon, which Johnson had bought for the Metropolitan Police without waiting for clearance from the then Home Secretary Theresa May, were to be sold, with the proceeds going to youth services. The vehicles proved unsellable and were eventually sold for scrap in 2018 at a £300,000 loss. Return to Parliament. Johnson initially said that he would not return to the House of Commons while remaining mayor. After much media speculation, in August 2014 he sought selection as the Conservative candidate for the safe seat of Uxbridge and South Ruislip at the 2015 general election, becoming the party's candidate in September. In the May 2015 general election, Johnson was elected MP. There was much speculation that he had returned to Parliament because he wanted to replace Cameron as Conservative leader and Prime Minister. Brexit campaign, 2015-2016. In February 2016, Johnson endorsed Vote Leave in the Out campaign for the 2016 United Kingdom European Union membership referendum. He called Cameron's warnings about leaving greatly over-exaggerated. Following this announcement, which was interpreted by financial markets as making Brexit more probable, the pound sterling slumped by nearly 2% against the US dollar, reaching its lowest level since March 2009. In April 2016, in an article for The Sun, in response to a comment by President Barack Obama that Britain should remain in the European Union, Johnson said an ancestral dislike of Britain owing to his part Kenyan background may have shaped Obama's views. Conservative MP Sir Nicholas Soames branded the comments idiotic and deeply offensive. Several Labour and Liberal Democrat politicians condemned them as racist and unacceptable. In light of the remark, a King's College London student society revoked a speaking invitation it had extended to him. Conversely, the Conservative Ian Duncan Smith politician and UK Independence Party leader Nigel Farage defended his comments. Johnson supported Vote Leave's statement that the government was committed to Turkish accession to the EU at the earliest possible opportunity, contradicting the Britain Stronger in Europe campaign's view that Turkey is not an issue in this referendum and it shouldn't be. Vote Leave was accused of implying that 80 million Turks would come to the UK if it stayed in the EU. When interviewed in January 2019, he said he had not mentioned Turkey during the campaign. On June 22, 2016, Johnson declared June 23 could be Britain's Independence Day in a televised debate in front of a 6,000-member audience at Wembley Arena. David Cameron, British Prime Minister at the time, specifically addressed Johnson's claim, publicly stating, "The idea that our country isn't independent is nonsense. This whole debate demonstrates our sovereignty." Following the victory of the Leave campaign, Cameron resigned as Conservative leader and Prime Minister. Johnson was widely regarded as the front-runner to succeed him. Johnson announced he would not stand in the Conservative leadership election. Shortly before this, Michael Gove, hitherto a Johnson ally, concluded that Johnson cannot provide the leadership or build the team for the task ahead. The Daily Telegraph called Gove's comments the most spectacular political assassination in a generation. Johnson endorsed Andrea Leadsome's candidature, but she dropped out of the race a week later, leaving Theresa May to be elected uncontested. Foreign Secretary, 2016-2018. After Theresa May had become Conservative Party leader and Prime Minister, she appointed Johnson Foreign Secretary in July 2016. Analysts saw the appointment as a tactic to weaken Johnson politically. The new positions of Brexit Secretary and International Trade Secretary left the Foreign Secretary as a figurehead with few powers. Johnson's appointment ensured he would often be out of the country and unable to organize and mobilize backbenchers against her, while forcing him to take responsibility for problems caused by withdrawing from the EU. Some journalists and foreign politicians criticized Johnson's appointment because of his history of controversial statements about other countries. His tenure in the role attracted criticism from diplomats and foreign policy experts. A number of diplomats, FCO staff, and foreign ministers who worked with Johnson compared his leadership unfavorably to previous foreign secretaries for his perceived lack of conviction or substantive positions on British foreign policy issues. Former Swedish Prime Minister Carl Bildt said, "I wish it was a joke." A senior official in Obama's government suggested Johnson's appointment would push the U.S. further towards Germany at the expense of the special relationship with the UK. On one occasion, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi walked out of a meeting with Johnson after a meeting did not get beyond the pleasantries. Johnson's visit to Turkey from 25 to September 27, 2016 was somewhat tense because he had won Douglas Murray's offensive poetry competition about the President of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, 4 months earlier. When questioned by a journalist whether he would apologize for the poem, Johnson dismissed the matter as trivia. Johnson pledged to help Turkey join the EU and expressed support for Erdogan's government. Johnson supported the Saudi Arabian-led intervention in Yemen and refused to block UK arms sales to Saudi Arabia, stating there was no clear evidence of breaches of international humanitarian law by Saudi Arabia in the war in Yemen. In September 2016, human rights groups accused him of blocking the UN inquiry into Saudi war crimes in Yemen. Given the UK-Saudi alliance, in December, he attracted attention for commenting the Saudis were akin to the Iranians in puppeteering and playing proxy wars throughout the Middle East. May said his comments did not represent the government's view. In November 2017, Johnson told the Foreign Affairs Select Committee that Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe, a British-Iranian dual citizen serving a 5-year prison sentence in Iran after being arrested for training citizen journalists and bloggers in a BBC World Service Trust project, had been simply teaching people journalism. Zaghari Ratcliffe had said that her visit had been made simply for her daughter to meet her grandparents. Facing criticism, Johnson stated he had been misquoted and that nothing he said had justified Zaghari Ratcliffe's sentence. In May 2018, Johnson backed the Iran nuclear deal framework, despite Donald Trump's withdrawal. Johnson said the deal brought economic benefits to the Iranian people. Johnson described the Gulen movement as a cult and supported Turkey's post-coup purges. He said that Turkey's coup attempt was deeply violent, deeply anti-democratic, deeply sinister, and it was totally right that it was crushed. In April 2017, Johnson said that Gibraltar's sovereignty was not going to change after Brexit. Johnson promised while in Northern Ireland that Brexit would leave the Irish border absolutely unchanged. In May 2017, during the 2017 United Kingdom general election, a woman criticised him for discussing ending tariffs on Indian whiskey in a Sikh temple in Bristol. He later expressed regret that the protester held differing views to his on alcohol. Johnson visited the islands of Anguilla and Tortola on September 13, 2017 to confirm the United Kingdom's commitment to helping restore British territories devastated by Hurricane Irma. He said he was reminded of photos of Hiroshima after the atom bomb had landed on it. In September 2017, he was criticized for reciting lines from Rudyard Kipling's poem Mandalay while visiting a Myanmar temple. The British ambassador, who was with him, suggested it was not appropriate. In October 2017, he faced criticism for stating the Libyan city of Sirte could become an economic success like Dubai. All they have to do is clear the dead bodies away. Johnson did not condemn the actions of the Spanish government and police during the outlawed Catalan independence referendum on October 1, 2017. Initially favoring a less hostile approach to Russia, Johnson soon backed a more aggressive policy towards Russia. Following the March 2018 poisoning of Sergei and Yulia Skripal in Salisbury, an act which the UK government blamed on Russia, Johnson compared Vladimir Putin's hosting of the World Cup in Russia to Adolf Hitler's hosting of the Olympic Games in Berlin in 1936. Russia's foreign ministry denounced Johnson's unacceptable and unworthy parallel towards Russia, a nation that lost millions of lives in fighting Nazism. Johnson described the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline from Russia to Germany as divisive and a threat that left Europe dependent on a malign Russia for its energy supplies. Johnson condemned the persecution of Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar, comparing the situation with the displacement of Palestinians in 1948. Johnson supported the Turkish invasion of northern Syria aimed at ousting the Syrian Kurds from the enclave of Afrin. In a September 2017 op-ed, Johnson reiterated the UK would regain control of £350 million a week after Brexit, suggesting it go to the National Health Service. Cabinet colleagues subsequently criticised him for reviving the assertion and accused of clear misuse of official statistics by the chair of the UK Statistics Authority, Sir David Norgrove. The authority rejected the suggestion that it was quibbling over newspaper headlines and not Johnson's actual words. Following the 2017 general election, Johnson denied media reports he intended to challenge May's leadership. In a February 2018 letter to May, Johnson suggested that Northern Ireland may have to accept border controls after Brexit and that it would not seriously affect trade, having initially said a hard border would be unthinkable. In March 2018, Johnson apologized for his inadvertent sexism after being criticized for calling Shadow Foreign Secretary Emily Thornberry as Lady Nougy. Thornberry was married to Christopher Nougy but did not use his surname. In June, he was reported as having said "fuck business" when asked about corporate concerns regarding a hard Brexit. Johnson said that U.S. recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital is a moment of opportunity for peace. In June 2018, Johnson accused the UNRWA of focusing disproportionately on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories. Secret recordings obtained by BuzzFeed News in June 2018 revealed Johnson's dissatisfaction with Prime Minister Theresa May's negotiating style, accusing her of being too collaborative with the European Union in Brexit negotiations. Comparing May's approach to that of the U.S. President Donald Trump, who at the time was engaged in a combative trade war with the EU because it raised tariffs on metal, Johnson said, "Imagine Trump doing Brexit. He'd go in bloody hard. There'd be all sorts of breakdowns, all sorts of chaos. Everyone would think he'd gone mad. But actually you might get somewhere. It's a very, very good thought." He also called Philip Hammond and the Treasury the heart of Remain and accused individuals of scaremongering over a Brexit meltdown, saying "no panic. Pro bono publico, no bloody panic. It's going to be all right in the end." During trips to the United States as Foreign Secretary, Johnson had repeated meetings with Trump advisor and speechwriter Stephen Miller, which were held off White House grounds and kept quiet from May. During the meetings, Miller and Johnson swapped speechwriting ideas and tips. In July 2018, 3 days after the cabinet had its meeting at Chequers to agree on a Brexit strategy, Johnson, along with Brexit Secretary David Davis, resigned his post. Return to the backbenches, 2018-2019. By resigning as Foreign Secretary, Johnson returned to the role of a backbench MP. In July, he delivered a resignation speech, stating that ministers were saying one thing to the EU about what we are really doing, and pretending another to the electorate. Johnson added that it is not too late to save Brexit. "We have time in these negotiations. We have changed tack once and we can change once again." BuzzFeed reported Johnson had been in contact with Steve Bannon, Donald Trump's former chief advisor. In interviews, Bannon had praised Johnson and said he should challenge Theresa May for the party leadership. In January 2019, Johnson came under criticism for remarks he had made during the 2016 Leave campaign regarding the prospect of Turkish accession to the European Union. He denied making such remarks. In March 2019, Johnson said that expenditure on investigating historic allegations of child abuse, instead of more police on the streets, was money stuffed up the wall. A victim, anti-abuse organizations, a police chief and shadow police minister Louise Hay strongly criticized this. Journalism. 2019 Conservative Party leadership election. Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. First term. On July 24, 2019, the day following Johnson's election as Conservative Party leader, Queen Elizabeth II accepted Theresa May's resignation and appointed Johnson as Prime Minister. This made Johnson the second Prime Minister to be born outside the British Isles, after fellow Conservative Bonar Law, and the first to be born outside British territories. Johnson appointed Dominic Cummings, whom he worked with on the Vote Leave campaign, as his senior advisor. Brexit policy. First cabinet. Spending plans. Loss of working majority. 2019 general election. Second term. Second cabinet. COVID-19 pandemic. Departure of Dominic Cummings and Lee Cain. Legislative agenda. 2021 Downing Street refurbishment controversy. 2021 energy crisis. 2021 party conference speech. Owen Paterson controversy. Partygate scandal. Starmer slur controversy. New hospitals. Vote of confidence. June by-elections. Pincher scandal. Mass resignations. Announcement of resignation. LGBT issues. In early April 2022, Johnson decided to ban conversion therapy for sexual orientation but not for transgender Britons, despite previous commitment to end such treatment for all LGBT people. He defended his decision citing complexities and sensitivities, adding that he thought biological males should not compete in women's sport and women should have their own changing rooms. In the government's 2017 LGBT survey, 5% of the respondents said they had been offered a form of conversion therapy, with 2% saying they had undergone it. As a result of the transgender exclusion, over 100 organizations pulled out of a planned global equality conference, Safe to Be Me, which had to be abandoned as a result. Environmental policies. In November 2020, Johnson announced a 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution, which would include an end to the sale of petrol and diesel cars and vans by 2030, quadruple the amount of offshore wind power capacity within a decade, fund a variety of emissions-cutting proposals, and spurn a proposed green post-COVID-19 recovery. In 2021, the UK government under Johnson's leadership announced plans to cut carbon emissions by 78% by 2035. Johnson announced that the UK would join the global methane pledge to cut methane emissions by 30% by the year of 2030 at the 26 Colombian Pesos Summit, which the UK hosted. Before the summit, representatives of Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth criticized Johnson's comments on plans to introduce enforceable limits on carbon emissions for other countries, which they accused of being unsubstantive, and his government faced criticism from environmental groups for cutting taxes on domestic air travel, given the environmental impact of aviation. He was accused of hypocrisy, by Annalise Dodds of the Labour Party and others, for flying on a chartered private jet during 26 Colombian pesos to attend a reunion of Telegraph journalists at the Garrick Club. In April 2022, Johnson announced that 8 more nuclear reactors would be built on existing nuclear power plant sites, and called for an expansion in wind energy. Under these plans, up to 95% of the UK's electricity could come from low-carbon power sources by 2030. Foreign policy. Johnson supported the European Union-Mercosur Free Trade Agreement, which would form one of the world's largest free trade areas. Johnson's government placed importance on maintaining the special relationship with the United States. In 2022, his government introduced an asylum deal with Rwanda, whereby people entering the UK illegally would be sent to Rwanda. Chagos dispute. Hong Kong and China. Afghanistan. UK-EU trade negotiation. Russia and Ukraine. Post-premiership. After stepping down as party leader, Johnson reverted to being an ordinary backbench MP. Following the death of Queen Elizabeth II, Johnson took part in Charles III's accession council, and many other funeral-related events. After Liz Truss announced her resignation as Conservative Party leader on October 20, 2022, Johnson sought support from MPs to run in the subsequent leadership election, and received support from several cabinet members. 3 days later, he announced that he would not stand, stating that he would not have enough support from MPs to govern effectively. Electoral performance for the House of Commons. 1997 General Election, CLWYD South. None. 2001 General Election, Henley. none. 2005 general election, Henley, none. 2015 general election, Uxbridge and South Ruislip, none. 2017 general election, Uxbridge and South Ruislip, none. 2019 general election, Uxbridge and South Ruislip, none. Political positions and ideology. Ideologically, Johnson has been described by himself and others as a one-nation Tory. Political scientists have described Johnson's political positions as ambiguous and contradictory, encompassing nativist, authoritarian, and free market tendencies on the one hand, and one-nation liberal conservatism on the other. Some scholars have questioned Johnson's commitment to one-nation conservatism, instead characterizing his ideology as being flexible and populist. Purnell stated that Johnson regularly changed his opinion on political issues, commenting on what she perceived to be an ideological emptiness beneath the staunch Tory exterior. She later referred to his opportunistic, some might say pragmatic approach to politics. During his tenure as London mayor, Johnson gained a reputation as a liberal, centre-ground politician, according to Business Insider. In 2012, the political scientist Tony Traverse described Johnson as a fairly classic, that is, small-state mildly Eurosceptic conservative who, like his contemporaries Cameron and George Osborne, also embraced modern social liberalism. The Guardian stated that while mayor, Johnson blended economic and social liberalism, with The Economist saying that in doing so Johnson transcends his Tory identity and adopts a more libertarian perspective. According to political scientist Richard Hayden, Johnson's premiership centred around Brexit, which served as a national cause. Johnson evoked the discourse of popular sovereignty and anti-establishment populism to portray Parliament as seeking to sabotage Brexit, and in doing so, presented himself as the true representative of the people. In 2019, Al Jazeera editor James Brownswell said that although Johnson had leaned to the right since the Brexit campaign, he remained slightly more socially liberal than much of his party. Scholars of comparative politics have drawn comparisons between Johnson and other populist leaders such as Donald Trump and Viktor Orban. Some commentators have likened aspects of Johnson's political style to Trumpism, although others have argued against this, saying that Johnson's stance on matters such as social policy, immigration, and free trade is liberal. Johnson biographer Gimson wrote that Johnson is economically and socially a genuine liberal, although he retains a Tory element to his personality through his love of existing institutions, and a recognition of the inevitability of hierarchy. Stuart Reid, Johnson's colleague at The Spectator, described the latter's views as being those of a liberal libertarian. In 2019, reacting to reports in The Sun, that Johnson had told cabinet colleagues he was basically a Brexit Heza, former deputy leader of the Conservative Party Michael Heseltine said Johnson has no right to call himself a one-nation conservative and wrote, "I fear that any traces of liberal conservatism that still exist within the Prime Minister have long since been captured by the right-wing, foreigner-bashing, inward-looking view of the world that has come to characterize his fellow Brexiteers." Environment. According to They Work For You, Johnson has generally voted against what it described as measures to prevent climate change while an MP. While Mayor of London, Johnson expressed climate-skeptical views in several columns. In two Daily Telegraph columns published in 2012 and 2013, he conflated the distinction between weather and climate and highlighted a factually incorrect claim by weather forecaster and conspiracy theorist Piers Corbyn that reduced solar activity could lead to a mini ice age. Bloomberg News suggested that Johnson's interest in climate change increased after becoming Prime Minister, and suggested this could have been influenced by his wife Carrie Simons and father Stanley Johnson, who are both environmental campaigners. It was reported in 2022 that Johnson was convinced of the scientific consensus on climate change following a briefing by the chief scientist of the Met Office in January 2020, and subsequently made the issue a priority for his government. In 2019 and 2020, Johnson expressed support for the UK to have net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 and spoke about increasing ambition for mitigating climate change through carbon capture and storage and a renewable energy transition. During the 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference, Johnson called for greater efforts towards climate change mitigation, and welcomed the prospect of coal phase-out. Immigration and the European Union. Purnell believed it was the influence of Johnson's maternal family, the left-wing Fawcett's, that led to him developing a genuine abhorrence of racial discrimination. In 2003, Johnson said of the EU, "I am not by any means an ultra-Eurosceptic. In some ways, I am a bit of a fan of the European Union. If we did not have one, we would invent something like it." As Mayor of London, Johnson was known as a supporter of immigration. From 2009, he advocated a referendum on Britain's EU membership. In 2018, during the Brexit negotiations, he called for Britain to leave the single market and advocated a more liberal approach to immigration than that of Prime Minister Theresa May. He stated many people believed that Britain's EU membership had led to the suppression of the wages of its indigenous people and said the EU was intent on creating a superstate that would seek to rob Britain of its sovereignty. In 2019, Johnson said he would take Britain out of the EU on October 31 whether there was a trade deal in place or not. Johnson also stated his opposition to a referendum on the Brexit withdrawal agreement. On August 19, 2019, Johnson wrote a letter to the EU and asked for the removal of the backstop accord, which had previously been agreed and signed by Theresa May during her premiership. The President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, rejected the proposal. On August 26, 2019, Johnson said that Britain would not pay £39 billion for the withdrawal agreement were the UK to leave without a deal on October 31. The European Parliament Brexit coordinator Guy Verhofstadt said there would be no further negotiation on the trade deal unless the UK agreed to pay the entire sum. Unionism and devolution. Speaking in Northern Ireland, Johnson described himself as a fervent and passionate unionist. He proposed building a bridge or tunnel between Scotland and Northern Ireland, but has since scrapped this initiative. The devolved administrations have criticised the Internal Market Bill for its re-centralisation of control over commerce, reversing the devolution of power in the United Kingdom. Public image. Boris Johnson has been described by various biographers and commentators as having a light-hearted and charming persona, many of whom suggest he has put significant thought and effort into developing this version of himself throughout his adult life. He has been noted as making significant use of humor in relation to this, sometimes for explicitly political purposes. Johnson has said that humor is a utensil that you can use to sugar the pill and to get important points across. He is said to have a genuine desire to be liked. He has also been described, including by some of those that have known him personally, as heavily focused on his own interests, with an often vitriolic or irresponsible way of conducting himself in private. Johnson has been described as a divisive and controversial figure in British politics. Supporters have praised him as humorous, witty, and entertaining. Johnson has been accused of lying or making untruthful or misleading statements throughout his career, and has been described as racist and otherwise bigoted. Comparisons have been drawn with U.S. President Donald Trump. He has been considered a figure with broad appeal outside of the usual conservative support base. Johnson's premiership has been described by historians as the most controversial and scandal-affected since that of David Lloyd George about a century earlier. Personal life. Since Johnson was born in New York City to British parents, he first held British-American dual citizenship. In 2014, he acknowledged he was disputing a demand for capital gains tax from the U.S. tax authorities on a property that he inherited in the United Kingdom, which ultimately he paid. In February 2015, he announced his intention to renounce his U.S. citizenship to demonstrate his loyalty to the UK, which he did in 2016. Johnson has a knowledge of French, Italian, German, Spanish, Latin, and Ancient Greek, frequently employing and alluding to classical references in both his newspaper columns and his speeches. His favorite film is The Godfather, owing to the multiple retribution killings at the end. Purnell wrote that Johnson was a highly evasive figure when it came to his personal life, who remained detached from others and who had very few if any intimate friends. Among friends and family, Johnson is more commonly known as L, rather than his middle name Boris. In 2007, Johnson said he had smoked cannabis before he went to university. He has also said he had used cocaine. Johnson partakes in cycling, tennis and Pilates, and was formerly an avid runner before having to give it up owing to knee problems. Johnson's weight has fluctuated throughout his career. He was considered obese in 2018 and overweight in 2020, and has spoken of making efforts to lose weight. Johnson owns a £1.3 million buy-to-let townhouse in Camberwell, South London. According to Homeland Registry documents, he bought the 4-bedroom property with his then-girlfriend Carrie Simons in July 2019. The Register of MPs' Interests states that Johnson has a rental income of at least £10,000 a year. Religion. Johnson was baptized a Catholic and later confirmed into the Church of England, but has said that his faith comes and goes and that he is not a serious practicing Christian. In 2020, his son Wilfred was baptized Catholic, prompting suggestions that Johnson had returned to Catholicism. Johnson and Simons married in a Catholic ceremony at Westminster Cathedral on May 29, 2021. To be married in the Catholic Church, Johnson needed to have his 2 previous marriages proven to be invalid by reason of lack of canonical form. Since he was baptized Catholic, but his previous weddings were not conferred by the Catholic Church, they are considered putatively invalid. Johnson holds ancient Greek statesman and orator Pericles as a personal hero. According to Johnson's biographer, Andrew Gimson, regarding ancient Greek and Roman polytheism, it is clear that is inspired by the Romans, and even more by the Greeks, and repelled by the early Christians. Johnson views secular humanism positively and sees it as owing more to the classical world than to Christian thinking. However, in 2021, Johnson was asked if he held pre-Christian beliefs, which he denied, saying, "Christianity is a superb ethical system and I would count myself as a kind of very, very bad Christian. No disrespect to any other religions, but Christianity makes a lot of sense to me." Relationships. In 1987, Johnson married Allegra Mostyn Owen, daughter of the art historian William Mostyn Owen and Italian writer Gaia Servadio. The couple's marriage ended in divorce or annulment in 1993, and 12 days later Johnson married Marina Wheeler, a barrister, daughter of journalist and broadcaster Charles Wheeler. 5 weeks later, Wheeler and Johnson's first child was born. The Wheeler and Johnson families have known each other for decades, and Marina Wheeler was at the European School, Brussels, at the same time as her future husband. They have 4 children, Laura Lettuce, Milo Arthur, Kasia Peaches, and Theodore Apollo. Between 2000 and 2004, Johnson had an affair with Spectator columnist Petronella Wyatt when he was its editor, resulting in a terminated pregnancy and a miscarriage. In April 2006, the News of the World alleged that Johnson was having an affair with Guardian journalist Anna Fazakerley. The pair did not comment. Shortly afterward, Johnson employed Fazakerley. In 2009, Johnson fathered a daughter with Helen McIntyre, an arts consultant. In 2013, the Court of Appeal discharged an injunction banning reporting of his daughter's existence. The judge ruled the public had a right to know about Johnson's reckless behavior. There had been speculation that he might have had another child from an extramarital affair, due to an appeal court judge stating in 2013, the father's infidelities resulted in the conception of children on 2 occasions. In September 2021, after years of obfuscation, Johnson stated that he had 6 children, thereby denying the existence of any further illegitimate children. In September 2018, Johnson and Wheeler issued a statement confirming that after 25 years of marriage they had separated several months ago, and had begun divorce proceedings. They reached a financial settlement in February 2020, and the divorce was finalized by November 2020. In October 2020, Jennifer Arcuri, asked whether her friendship with Johnson was in fact an affair, said, "I think that goes without saying. But I'm not going to talk about it." In March 2021, she went into more detail about the alleged affair in an interview with the Sunday Mirror, saying it lasted from 2012 to 2016. In 2019, Johnson was living with Carrie Simons, the daughter of Matthew Simons, co-founder of the Independent newspaper. Simons had worked for the Conservative Party since 2009 and worked on Johnson's 2012 campaign to be re-elected as mayor. On February 29, 2020, Johnson and Simons announced they had become engaged in late 2019, and that Simons was expecting a baby in early summer. Their son, Wilfred Laurie Nicholas Johnson, was born on April 29, 2020 at University College Hospital in London. On May 29, 2021, Johnson married Simons in a secret ceremony at Westminster Cathedral attended by 30 guests, becoming the first Prime Minister to marry in office since Lord Liverpool married Mary Chester in 1822. On July 31, 2021, it was announced that they were expecting their second child together after Carrie suffered a miscarriage earlier that year. Their daughter, Romy Iris Charlotte Johnson, was born on December 9, 2021 at an NHS London hospital. Family and ancestors. Johnson is the eldest of the 4 children of Stanley Johnson, a former Conservative member of the European Parliament and an employee of the European Commission and the World Bank, and the painter Charlotte Johnson Wall, the daughter of Sir James Fawcett, a barrister and president of the European Commission of Human Rights. His younger siblings are Rachel Johnson, a writer and journalist, Leo Johnson, a partner specializing in sustainability at accountancy firm PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Joe Johnson, ex-Minister of State and former Conservative MP for Orpington, who resigned from his brother's government in September 2019 and is now a member of the House of Lords. Johnson's stepmother, Jenny, the second wife of his father Stanley, is the stepdaughter of Teddy Seif, the former chairman of Marks and Spencer. Having been a member of the Conservatives between 2008 and 2011, Rachel Johnson joined the Liberal Democrats in 2017. She stood as a candidate for Change UK in the 2019 European elections. Johnson also has 2 half-siblings, Julia and Maximilian, through his father's later marriage to Jennifer Kidd. Johnson's paternal grandfather, Wilfred Johnson, was an RAF pilot in Coastal Command during the Second World War. Wilfred Johnson's father was the Ottoman Interior Minister and journalist Ali Kemal, who was a secular Muslim. Ali Kemal's father was a Turk with roots in Kafat, a village in central Turkey, while his mother was a Circassian reputedly of slave origin. His other paternal ancestry includes English, German and French. One of his German ancestors was said to be the illegitimate daughter of Prince Paul of Württemberg and thus a descendant of George II of Great Britain. Johnson's mother is the granddaughter of Elias Avery Lowe, a paleographer, who was a Russian Jewish immigrant to the U.S., and Pennsylvania-born Helen Tracy Lowe Porter, a translator of Thomas Mann. Through this family line, Johnson is a descendant in the 7th generation of Anna Katharina Bischoff, whose mummified corpse was found in 1975 and identified in 2018. Referring to his varied ancestry, Johnson has described himself as a one-man melting pot with a combination of Abrahamic religious great-grandparents. Johnson was also given the middle name Boris after a white Russian émigré named Boris Litwin, who was a friend of his parents. An episode of Who Do You Think You Are? Explored the German origins of his middle name Pfeffel. Honours. Honorary degree of Doctor of Laws from Brunel University London, 2007. Honorary Fellowship of the Royal Institute of British Architects, 2011. Honorary Australian of the Year in the UK, January 26, 2014. Sworn in as a member of Her Majesty's Most Honourable Privy Council on July 15, 2016, upon his appointment as Foreign Secretary. This gave him the honorific title the Right Honourable for life. Medical Education Ig Nobel Prize, 2020. Honorary Citizen of Odessa, July 2, 2022. Member of the Order of Liberty, August 24, 2022. Works. See also: Electoral history of Boris Johnson. Racism in the UK Conservative Party, accusations against Boris Johnson. Notes. References.